welcome to this episode of our Tea with OTs podcast. I'm so excited to introduce to you Thuyvi here. We have our student, and we're going to learn about her perspectives and some of the things that she'd like to share with us about her experience being an occupational therapy graduate student. So, Thuyvi, what tea are you drinking today?
I'm drinking a passion fruit tea. I think it's green tea, right?
Ooh, yeah.
With boba. So
Okay.
it's really good.
Love it. I have a Thai milk tea today with easy boba. Dr. Ang?
And I just have a Coke from McDonald's.
We're trying something different today. Alrighty, so now that we have our tea introductions and our introduction to our lovely Thuyvi, we're going to start with our first question of the day. So my question for you is, how did you hear about occupational therapy and what made you want to pursue OT?
So when I was around, I want to say 20 years old, I kind of dabbled on the internet and I was like, jobs to use for health science, health science degree. And then it was like social worker or like tech, like lab tech. And I said OT, and I was like, what is an OT? And then so I did like some research, and then I got my first like OT job at a hand clinic. I was there for around like 10 months. It was like that's pretty long for me. Usually I hit like 4 or 5 months and I'm out. So, yeah, and then I actually enjoyed like doing interventions or like sitting in interventions and like with the patients. It was just something I've never done before. Something health related I've never done before. So yeah, that's why I'm here.
So you could say that experience got, and opened doors for you and it got you into the practice.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So my next question for you is, what are some areas you're interested in practicing in?
One is neuro, of course, but I was talking about inpatient acute rehab. And I mean, it's a lot of ADL work, like Dr. Ang had said. So now I'm kind of thinking of outpatient.
Okay.
So I'm very influenced very easily. I think neuro is like number one. Number two would be early intervention, so like 0 to 3.
Mm-hmm.
But like anything past that, I don't think I want to.
Well, I have a follow-up question to that. So rather than think of the setting that you want to work in, like what types of OT interventions are you most interested in?
I like stroke interventions. Like I find them so interesting. Like I don't know, just that and a lot of like spinal cord. Yeah.
Got it.
It's very complex, and I think that's why I like it.
Sure. So with that being said, I don't think you necessarily have to put yourself in a specific setting, whether that's like acute or inpatient, etc. For myself, like working primarily in neuro, I've worked in the ICU, acute, inpatient, outpatient, home health, and I did all that at the same time. It was just with the same population being in stroke or brain injury. So I think that could be another avenue for you to look into.
That sounds good. That sounds good, but I'm scared.
as we are as students, right? I mean, you're early on in your academic career, you still have field work to go, and hopefully that'll help, refine exactly what you want to do.
Yeah. So we'll see.
Yeah. The beauty of OT, so many different avenues, right?
There's so many. There's too many.
So, speaking of your student and academic career, what were some, now that you're kind of in the thick of things now, what were some things you would have liked to know before applying to grad school?
The stress, how it's going to affect my mental health, the amount of times that I've cried, and how much time I spend here rather than my bed, and the gas, lots of gas.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So every week I have to get like, I think it's every 5 days I have to get gas, and it's about $60 for my tank. So it's not cost efficient. But yeah, I would want someone to like tell me like before, like, okay, so this is all the stress you're going to endure. this is how many times you're gonna cry, and it's going to affect you like so mentally that you'll need therapy.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I got into therapy a few, I want to say like 6 months ago. I did it for about 3 months, and I was like, I don't think I need it anymore. And then I stopped therapy, and now I don't know. We'll see.
Follow up question to that was: did you find it to be helpful?
It was a little helpful because it was like unbiased, and like it was just a stranger, and I've never done therapy before. So it was like interesting. But I'm a very open person, so it wasn't as hard as like people like make it to be. Yeah, but it helped for a little bit, and then I realized that I didn't need it anymore, and then I
Okay.
just stopped therapy after like 3 months, I think. Yeah.
Would you recommend, going into therapy for other students, maybe?
Yes, I highly recommend, like, if you're coping with a lot of stress, and like if you need like an out, like an out, oh,
Outlet.
outlet.
Uh-huh.
Yes, that's a word. But yeah, I mean, it helps. And I was very biased with my own opinion on therapy, where I'm like, I don't need help. I'm very stubborn. So, but it works.
Well, I'm glad you're able to find something that works for you,
Yeah.
and maybe this is something that other students might look to you for and follow in your footsteps. Like, we all need our own type of way of coping through graduate school, right?
Yeah.
It's high stress, it's a lot of pressure, it's you're balancing your work, your school, and just trying to develop your own character as a whole, right? So this is definitely a time for understanding what sacrifices you have to make, but also understanding that it is going to be so worth it in the long run.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And just to share a little about myself too, and I haven't really mentioned this before in the podcast world, but I've been in and out of therapy multiple times over the course of my life, like in undergrad, in grad school, after grad school. And I'm not talking about just like dabbling in therapy. This was like pretty hardcore, like on antidepressants, for depression, anxiety, etc. So thank you for sharing your experiences, because I think that for those out there who need help and they're looking for something, please get help. I think it's important to really take care of your mental health.
Yeah. I mean, to add on to that, like a little personal fact about me, I was actually diagnosed with severe depression and anxiety, like, I want to say 3 years ago. And then that contributed to like my OCD, and it was like very hard. And like I said, I'm very stubborn. So like therapy was like not an option for me. I was like, I'll do anything but therapy. But like going into it, like it's very different, and I like it, but it's not usually what I would go into.
Sure.
Just personally.
Got it.
But I was kind of like, okay, I need change.
Mhm.
But yeah.
So having said all that, like how do you manage now, like with things related to balance or lifestyle, mental health, etc., with all the demands that you have in your program? Like how are you starting to cope and balance with all of those things?
My number one is just my support system. I think that's so like important for being in like a job or in school. My support system, especially my family, my friends here. Um, Jason and Darcy, you already know. They're like, I can't go through this program without them. Yeah. And it was very hard at first because like you're going into something so new, and honestly I didn't know what was going to go down, and I wasn't expecting the workload. I thought I was going to cruise through, have the time of my life, but no. um, and managing like taking at least an hour or two for myself every day.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't matter if like I have like so many things due tomorrow. I'm going to take that hour or 2 hours for myself.
Yeah.
Like taking a shower, just laying on my bed, going on TikTok. I think that's so important.
Yeah.
But I don't want to talk about like how it's like, oh, self-care, it's self-care. I'm just saying like just take time for yourself. I don't want to do like face mask. Like I don't need that.
Yeah, it looks different for everybody.
Yeah,
Right?
like I don't need like a bath.
Uh-huh.
You know, I just like just being alone.
Yeah,
for myself.
it's something for you.
Yeah.
And honestly, I really applaud you for finding that out now,
Yeah.
because I'm also an anxious individual. I was diagnosed with severe anxiety in 2016, and I've been managing since then and finding different ways. And so, I didn't find out about that at least 1 hour break until maybe the end of my fieldwork. So I'm still working on getting that hour for myself. So I applaud you for that. That is amazing.
Hard.
Yeah.
Thank you. But like I told myself, like I do not care if I have like 3 finals tomorrow. I'm taking an hour break for myself. Like I don't care. Like if I do bad, okay, so what? Like if I just need a pass, that's all I need.
Yeah.
I think that's a kind of a bad mentality, but
not necessarily. Yeah, because I think if you take that 1 hour break, then your performance for the final would probably be better.
Oh yeah, that's true.
Yeah, so you're slowly finding the tools that work for you, and I think that's the difficulty and the beauty of grad school, I guess, is that like you go through all these challenges just to figure out ways to cope. You know, and then at the end of it, you're like, okay, this is how I work under this amount of stress or this amount of pressure.
Well, switching gears a little bit, I'd like to ask, what do you enjoy about your program? And maybe something a little more controversial, what do you not enjoy about your program?
Ooh. What I do enjoy is that it's not as far from my house as like a lot of people. It's only 20 miles, but there's a lot of traffic. You know, it takes me like 35 minutes to get here. It takes me an hour 30 to get home. So I guess that's a good thing and a bad thing. I enjoy that our cohorts are smaller. I think it brings like a sense of family. And I love my cohort, and I think that's like the one big thing, because I know that other schools have like 40, 50, 60 people in their cohorts. That's a lot. That's a lot of people. And I don't think I know them all, but like now, like here, like I know each and every one of them, and I enjoy their presence. Another enjoyment, well, I can't think of one right now. But let's say a con. I feel like all the classes are just bunched up all together. So like let's say like second trimester, taking 7 or 8 classes and having every single like class be like back to back to back to back. That was very tiring. Very tiring. I was not a fan. And this term is a little bit better because we have 5 classes. That's amazing. I get to sleep. So good. That's so good.
In relation to all that, so what are some things that you think professors do for the students or for the cohort that you find helpful, and maybe some things, and you mentioned this already, but some things that you wish that they didn't do? We can elaborate on some of these things.
I like your class, especially because you do a lot of hands-on, and I just like to experience it more than just listening to it and then going one ear out the other. It's harder for me to listen than it is for me to like. I need to do things. Like, what is it called?
Like application.
Yeah, application kinesthetic. Yeah,
sure.
And I like that a lot of projects that we do like actually coincide with like what we're actually learning. I feel like that's a lot easier than like having a random project and not basing it off of what we're not learning. So like a lot of like neuro things that you've been talking about throughout this whole trimester, you had it in our like signature like assignments, and it was really interesting to do research and conduct our facilitations today, especially. It was really interesting.
Yeah. No, and you had a really amazing project, on Parkinson's and showing us different types of movements, etc. So I think just having an opportunity to apply some of the skills could be helpful. But I think every program out there should really look into different teaching methods, because how we are as OTs is we don't just utilize lectures. Like we utilize all these different types of interventions, and I think those are the skills that we should be focused on.
Yeah. I really like learning about interventions because it gets us like ready for actual field work or jobs after, getting our license. Because like just looking at lectures and reading books, I don't think it helps. But like actually doing the interventions,
Sure.
I think that's very interesting to me.
That we're on to the topic of being a kinesthetic learner, learning through application and this and that, would you say that's probably how you learn best? Like, what are some other ways that help you learn best?
I think number one is hands-on. Number two is writing down each and every lecture that I've had. I would write it down on a piece of paper and pen. I cannot do it on my iPad. I cannot type, and if I type, that means I'm lazy. That means I'm like, okay, like I just want to memorize a little bit, but I have to handwrite every single, let's say, like note that I've had. I think that's like the easiest way I learn. And also Quizlet, of course, utilize your Quizlet, and also testing yourself with like friends, like going over certain processes or like diagnoses with your friends and going over and over with them. I think that's the easiest way I learn. It's a lot.
So like group learning.
Group learning is great, but also like visual, hands-on.
Yeah,
a little bit of auditory, but yeah. And if I say it, then I think I'll learn more. If I keep talking about it, I'll learn more.
Yeah, no, totally.
That's kind of weird.
Yeah, one of the things that I used to do with my cohort was we would teach each other.
Yeah.
Like we would be like, okay, so let's cover this topic, let's cover that topic, and we'd teach each other the concepts that we learn in class. And honestly, that it helps you with your organizing the thoughts in your brain and all of that, but it also helps solidify this is what I know. And so if you kind of stumble upon certain areas, you're like, okay, that's what I need to review a little bit more on.
Yeah.
So yeah, I love that idea.
Yeah.
It helps us so much.
We test each other back and forth.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's the easiest way to learn if you're like low on time.
Yeah. It's a good one.
I think something that's really underrated and not a lot of people utilize is just office hours, or just coming to the professor directly if they're open to it, which I hope they are, and just asking them, questions. And then it's, if you have a receptive professor, it should almost be like a one-on-one tutorial session where the professor can clarify information, because maybe something is missed in the lecture, or the connection just isn't there. The professor can cater it to that one individual. That's at least the hope. And that was one of the things that I've always really enjoyed doing in terms of this job, is just being able to get to know my student individually, like know how they are, how they learn, and try to change up the way that I educate just for that one person. Yeah.
That is pretty helpful. I feel like a lot of people don't utilize it because they're anxious about it. Like, all their friends are going to lunch, but like I have to wait like 5 to 10 minutes after class. Like, what are they gonna do? Like, think of me, like that I don't get it, that I don't understand the whole like lecture, or I feel like it's just like a personal problem.
That's really interesting, because I mean, like, from my perspective, a lot of really highly intelligent students come after class and we have the most profound conversations that were never said in lecture. And like, I never view the student as like they didn't get it. It's like, now we've elevated the conversation into something that's something that we just didn't do in class.
I think also like having a personal connection with the professor, I think that helps a little bit more. But let's say I do go into a class and I'm not really like there when it comes to like being in class, and not really paying attention. I feel like going to the professor, they're gonna be like, oh, you weren't paying attention, that's why you're here. I think it's just anxiety. I think it's just my anxiety.
Part of the anxiety. Yeah.
I think it's just like my personal thing where it's like, oh, they're gonna know I'm not paying attention. That's why I'm here. Why else would I be here? Unless like I have a question about like a project, or like I don't know. I think it's just a personal problem.
Yeah, it could be. I don't know. I challenge you to, like, if there is, I mean, it's one thing getting asked a question that's on the syllabus that
Mhm.
maybe the professor covered multiple
Mhm.
times. But even then, like some of those questions could just be about clarity,
That is
right?
true.
Versus like a concept that's a little bit more difficult. Hey, professor, I'm having trouble wrapping my head around this, or can you give me a different example,
Mhm.
etc. I think that approach could, could be more helpful.
Mhm.
Gotcha. Thank
Yeah.
you for that.
I feel like if a student kind of makes an effort to like look at things in another perspective, for example, I think that just shows their, their scholarly like habits, and I think that's great. So honestly, sometimes I would stay after class and ask questions because a I wanted to know a little bit more about a certain topic, or b my classmates and I would all collectively ask together. So maybe if it's a social thing that you're worried about, you guys can make it a group effort to kind of figure some stuff out together.
That is
But
true.
I think one of the other rules of thumb is not on the syllabus. Okay, if it's not on there, then you can ask. Yeah, that's usually one of the things. But other than that, like if it's something that was covered in another lecture, or if it was already like talked about and you just want elaborate, like you want it to be elaborated on, I think that's perfectly fine.
I think everyone just has like different perspectives.
Yeah, it's all like their own anxieties
Yeah.
about it. Yeah.
Which is why communication is important, right?
Yeah.
Because like we don't look at it from this side as well. Yeah. And truth be told, sometimes I get asked something that's in the syllabus. I'm not even fully aware of like what's in my syllabi, right? It's been 10 years and like 10 different variations of syllabi that I'm like, which one is this now? And so, I mean, I need clarity on my end as well.
Gotcha.
That being said, what are some things that you want to learn more about? Like that you haven't really encountered much in the program yet that you want to know more? I know you mentioned neuro, but is there any other thing out there?
Parkinson's. I'm gonna be honest, I still don't know what's going on with Parkinson's. I know there's tremors, there's rigidity, bradykinesia, dysarthria, but I don't think we've had a lecture on Parkinson's at all. I think we've learned like a little bit of it, like learning about, let's say, like one or two slides about it, like having like practical topics on it, but not really getting tested on it. So all I know is that's all I know. And doing my project for your class, I found out so much more about Parkinson's that I did not know. And the power moves method, like it was so intriguing to me because I didn't know they need to do like big movements to help with their tremors. That makes no like it doesn't make sense to me, but it works. So I really want to go into that a little bit more.
Gotcha. Yeah.
And I know that we have peds next term, and I'm really interested in learning about peds. I don't want to go into it personally, but I don't know anything about children, so I feel like this would help a lot.
Gotcha. Yeah. Well, hopefully, I mean, there's a lot coming still, so hopefully you get that information.
Yeah. So we'll see.
Well, do you have questions for us, Thuyvi?
I do. So, what advice would you give new grads or even like students now?
Riza, I was a new grad 15 years ago, so this is probably a good question for you.
As I reach the end of my term and I hit graduation soon, advice wise to current students, I would just recommend, and this is going to sound so cliche, but it's taking it day by day and making sure that you stay organized in a sense of priority lists. So, like, for example, like I lived and breathed task lists. So if I had things to do, that's what I would go off of. But that's just how I am. Other people, maybe that might trigger some anxiety for them. So, but other advice that I would have is also connect with your professors. Like I think it's good to pick their brain a little bit because they have the experience. Mm-hmm. So that's when you go to them to learn from them, right? So another piece of advice that I would also have is, practicing certain skills with your cohort, which you already do, but continuing to do that and nurturing your relationship with your cohort mates, mm-hmm. because you learn from each other all the time. And another piece of advice would, I want to say, like you said, take the hour to yourself. Just make sure you squeeze in some things, but also know that this is a snapshot of your life.
Yeah.
You know, all of the hardships that you're going through now, it's gonna unfold a little differently later on. So my advice to you is to just take it day by day and appreciate small little things, even though it's really, really hard right now.
Live in the moment.
Live in the moment. As hard as as easy as it is to say now.
I agree. I don't think you necessarily need to be a new grad. You could be somebody with 10, 20, 30 years of experience. I feel like, and not even in OT, I feel like in any job that you're in or any situation you're in, I think you have to remember your why for being there.
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to occupational therapy, like remember why you wanted to be an OT. And that's because like at some point you're gonna get jaded in this career, in any career, whether you're a new grad or you have a lot of experience. And if you remember and hold on to that reason why you wanted to be an OT, that can be a very powerful thing.
Yeah, I feel like that's really important.
Yeah. Because if you look back on like, oh, what was the feeling that I had when I was applying to grad school? What's the feeling I had while in grad school? And then what's the feeling I had, as I reached the end of grad school?
Mm-hmm.
And then like, what is it all for again? I like what Dr. Ang said, like, what's your why? And I think I've had some time to reflect on that, and it just makes you more excited to, spread your wings. And so I think that's something to look forward to.
Oh, that's really good.
Yeah. Remember your
really
why.
Yeah, that's really good because like I understand my why. It's just the process getting there is really hard.
Oh yeah.
For sure.
So yeah. So going off of that, how do you guys feel about the cost of grad school? And do you think it's cost efficient, or do you think it's worth it to be here, or to go through it in general?
That's a really good question. I think it's highly relative.
Mm-hmm.
I think it depends on what other options you potentially might have had. I think it depends on what you want to do in the future. So, and I say that not just regarding our program or any graduate program, but I think just in education in general, any big purchase in general. Like if you're going to buy a house, right, your return of investment is not going to be hypothetically until like 5, 10 years down the line, right? So, and same thing with in terms of education, you're going to put a lot of money up front, and your return is probably not going to be until a couple of years later down the line. Now, if it's a really expensive program, let's say it's like, I don't know, 200 grand or something like that, and a typical OT makes 100 grand a year, and then you factor in lifestyle costs and student loan debt, etc., and it's going to take you like 20 years to make that return. I don't know about that. I might look into different things, or I might look into a much cheaper school. So I think it does depend on your lifestyle, your living situation, what you plan to do, what your anticipated salary is, etc. So I think all of those factors need to be taken into account to be worth it for that person. I think for me back then, 15 years ago, when tuition wasn't as crazy, when I did the math, like that was the first thing I did. I did the math, and if it made sense, then I pursued it, and I'm here 15 years later. If you do the math today, and if it makes sense for you, then I think it's worth it. If it doesn't, maybe that's something to think about before you really get into the thick of things.
Gotcha. I think this was just an impulse thing that I did. I saw the price and I still agreed on it, so I think it was very impulsive of me, but it needed to be done. So I can't back out now.
Well, sometimes you can also think of it as like it's an investment on, your education. Nobody can take away your education, right?
Yeah.
So it's an investment for yourself too. I don't know, but I was also raised to very like highly prioritize education because that was like the number one thing that my mom always told me, like nobody can take your education from you, so no matter what the cost, like as long as you're growing and learning and you can you can do your dream job or do something that you want to do, then it's worth it. So that's another perspective.
That is
maybe
a really
it
good
might
perspective.
be a little too optimistic, but
But from a more practical perspective,
practical.
Because I don't know if I understand that too. Because in my generation, like we also highly prioritize education, but these days we're realizing that education may not be as lucrative or fruitful as the public makes it out to
Yeah.
be. So if you paid for any program at a certain price point, then you have to make sure that your income or your job is going to pay you like an amount where you can still live comfortably and you can pay down those loans, etc. Because you don't want to have a negative return, or you don't want it to be forever that you're not living life anymore. So if you find yourself, and this is for anybody out there who just happened to go to a really expensive school, you just have to really aim for maybe a higher paying job in order to make it worth it.
Yeah.
So you might have less flexibility, but I think that's the reality of things.
I know life is kind of scary, but I feel like it's hard because like fast food places are now paying like $25 to $30 an hour, but then certain, let's say, office jobs, you need a master's, but they're paying 18.
Yeah.
So I guess you're right. Like education sometimes isn't worth it for like that much money, or getting paid $18 like an hour for let's say your master's or your doctorate.
Yeah. I guess it just boils down to what you want to do as an individual.
Yeah.
So.
It's really interesting because I heard on I was listening to a podcast, and a caller called in for advice. I think he was 18 years old, and he started his own business, and he was making 100K.
Oh, wow.
And he was wondering if he should scale or go pursue a college degree. And the advice that he was given was like, go and get your degree. You can take your business even further. I disagree with that. I'd say like at that age you're making six figures.
Yeah.
Like you don't know how much you can scale, so why don't you give that a shot?
Yeah.
And then like you can always go back for
That
your
is
education,
true.
but like where you are right now, that could be a very like a moment that is one in a million.
That
right?
is very
So
true.
why not take your chance?
Wow. 18 years old.
Yeah, and I think that's also bringing up the whole stigma of like the timeline that you have to follow, or like the age that you have to be when you finish whatever school that you're in. So I feel like that brings up the point, like you can always go back if that's something that you want to do. But if you're already doing something that works for you, then
you might as well just stay with that. Stick with it.
The advice that I tend to give like anybody is like, if you want to try to be successful in life, whatever success means to you, whether it's like financially or whether it's anything else, it's never really about like how smart you are. In a lot of cases, it's not even about how much effort you put in. It's really all about how opportunistic you are. If you see those opportunities that are not very frequent, then you got to jump on them.
That is true. Yeah, I agree. But I can relate to Riza, where I'm very like, my family prioritized education, so like going to college was a big deal. Like getting my master's was like a bigger deal, and it was very important for my family to like honor that. So when I see someone who doesn't, like, who didn't even graduate high school and like they're working full time somewhere, it's very hard to me, like it's very hard for me to digest.
Gotcha.
But I feel like opportunities are endless here.
Yeah.
Like you can be 17 or 18 making 100K.
Yeah.
That's insane. And there are people who are in their 30s or 40s not even making that much, and they've been working for 20, 30 years.
Sure.
Yeah.
Or you can have a PhD and you're still paying off student loan debt.
Agreed.
Like at 50 or 60.
Yeah. So
yeah.
You're right about that. So there was another question I had. What would you do other than OT if you were to do something else?
I feel like I always change my answer because there's so many other things that I'm like, oh, I could be like this, like flight attendant Barbie or something. I feel like I'm still so fresh that the only thing that's in my brain is like OT. But if I was to pursue another career, I actually almost got into echocardiology. So it's basically sonography for like your heart.
That's really
so
cool.
You work closely with cardiologists and other medical team members and hospital based, and you can also travel. So that was something that I was also interested in the beginning too.
And why aren't you there?
Because I like what Dr. Ng said, opportunities. This opportunity arose for me, and then it was something that I always wanted. So I was like, oh, great, awesome. I worked towards this.
Gotcha. Dr.
We
Ray?
talked about this in other podcasts. I
Yeah.
think I said if I can have my dream job, it would be like a Michelin guide inspector and whatnot. Or I look into things like architecture, real estate, but I'm happy to be an OT. I probably wouldn't have the skills in those other areas, so I wouldn't thrive as much.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha. That's really
I
cool.
mean, my other thing was being an esthetician or a hairstylist, so I could go to beauty school.
I think you can do that.
Oh, thank you.
I mean, I'd go to culinary school. That's always been
Oh,
my dream.
cool. Yeah.
That's
You
always
can
been my
make that
dream.
OT. You can find a way to make
Can
it
I?
OT. Yeah.
You can make anything OT.
You can.
honestly.
That's the.
I know OTs who work at Disneyland. You know, like
Huh?
they service the employees there for like the
Oh.
injuries that might have occurred on the job,
Oh,
and they're
that's so
on
cool.
site.
Mhm.
So I think there's a lot of potential in any case. You know.
Oh, that's really cool.
Yeah. That was one of my driving. I don't think I ever told you this, Dr. Ang, but that was one of the things that actually made me want to pursue OT even more. When I found out that OTs and PTs were at Disneyland,
Yeah.
I was like, "You mean I can work for Disney stuff? You mean I can go to the park for free?
For free? That's really good.
Yeah, those are just some things I thought about.
So another question I had for you guys was, do you think these programs actually help prepare for the realities of clinical practice? Well, you already did your fieldwork, but do you think it prepared you a little bit?
Honestly, I think it did. I personally felt like the skills that I developed, like it was also soft skills that I developed while doing my didactics that I brought into my fieldwork experience. Of course, it's very different because you're working under one. You're under one person, and you're following their style of things. So you kind of have to adapt to that. However, I feel like all of the hands-on experience that I got and the lecture material that we went through, I felt like it carried into the settings that I was at very well, especially peds. I had hand therapy experience, so taking the things that I learned from didactics into the hand therapy fieldwork experience was also helpful. I want to say everything from my peds course and all of the labs and everything, even the practicals, it was so close to what we did in the pediatric fieldwork site. I personally feel like it helped me going into fieldwork. So, and even going into, my capstone, like a lot of those things kind of helped carry into that as well. So,
Gotcha. Thank you.
You know, I was hoping it would, but I think after this conversation, we probably should take a look at the curriculum and in terms of what you said about maybe the lack of hands-on activities, etc. Um, but I think in any program out there, we have accreditation standards to follow. That's across the board. If you're an accredited program, you fulfill those requirements. And we fulfill those requirements. But does that translate to what the realities of practice are? I don't know. I think programs try their best. But if you think about like how we do things in terms of practicals, you work with other students, you work with the professors, you work with maybe standardized patients. For those of you who don't know, standardized patients are actors, and they're brilliant actors, but they're not real patients. I think you won't really get the realities of practice unless you're in it and unless you're working with real patients, which I don't believe programs do because there's liability issues and barriers, etc. So I think we try to simulate that as much as we possibly can, but you won't get that until you're actually in fieldwork or on the job, etc. But again, like I think we try to, or programs should try to prepare students as much as we can given the barriers that we have.
Ooh, gotcha. Thank you. That was really good. And I know you already said this a little bit before, but do you enjoy what you do? Do you actually enjoy what you do?
I do. I'm at the point of my life, at the age of my life, and the stage of my life where I don't do things that I don't want to do. Like at this point in my life is too short. If I don't want to do it, I'm not going to do it. If I don't want to work here, if I don't want to be a professor, I wouldn't do it. The mentality that I sort of have now is like, would I do this if I wasn't going to get paid for it? Would I do this on a volunteer basis? And if my answer is still yes, then I'm going to be here, which is why I'm here. So I think that's a very fortunate position to be in. I don't think a lot of people are fortunate to be in that position for whatever reason. But I think because of the things that I've experienced in my life, I want things to be meaningful to me. So actually do really enjoy what I do as being both an OT and also an OT professor.
Nice. Well, thank you for that. And do you enjoy?
Yeah, I mean, as a current capstone student, I am absolutely loving being here, doing this podcast and learning as much as I can, working closely with Dr. Ang and seeing the other faculty. I look forward to being able to use these skills to help other OTs and help other help my clients in the future. So it's right now I'm at the point where I'm just eager to take all of the things that I was able to learn and experience and collect and put it into practice. So right now that's where I'm at. So just excited.
Oh, yay.
I do enjoy what I do.
That being said, like as a caveat, like you're gonna have some bad days, you know, and that's life, and people are gonna go through it and whatnot. But if you still look at the big picture, and I think I mentioned this before, maybe you don't like the job that you're in or the position that you're in, but if you still love and enjoy your work, if you still want to do OT the way that you want to do OT, then it can be a blessing. It could be really such a lovely thing that to be in.
Thank you for that. That was so beautiful. Love that. And I think that should be all the questions that we have, or I have.
Yeah, well, thank you, Thuyvi. We had a great time chatting with you. Learned a lot for sure.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here.
Thank you, Thuyvi. Really appreciate your, being so candid with us and just being able to share all of your experience and some of the feedback that you have. I think it's really helpful for other students to watch this and for other faculty and maybe other OT professionals who are, taking in fieldwork students as well. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, everyone. Don't forget, if you have questions for us, let us know. We won't shy away from the harder or more controversial topics. We're happy to chat about them. So send us your questions.
Thank you, guys.